all so much for coming out to the Alabama Coalition Against Rape's Awareness Day. We have some fabulous speakers here to talk to you, and our first is our esteemed Executive Director, Kimberly Love.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Alabama Coalition Against Rape and our entire membership. Today is a very important day. This is our opportunity to contribute to the national dialogue on behalf of victims and survivors within the borders of Alabama and throughout this country. Now is the time for victims and survivors to rise up and to shine a light on decades of sexual harassment, assault, and rape that have been systematically covered up throughout this country. Women and men across the country have spoken out to reveal the culture of silence and collusion that surrounds sexual assault. However, as each new victim or survivor shed the veil of isolation and shame that so often surrounds sexual assault and coercion, another victim or survivor was empowered to say, "Me too." Their voices became a movement that is sweeping the nation and legitimizing feelings long buried and festering. For years, ACAR has taken up the mantle to engage our policymakers by ensuring that we not only have responsive but responsible legislation with a focused lens on harm reduction for victims of sexual violence. We want policies that contribute to safe spaces, places where Girl Scouts can live, work, learn, and thrive. While our hearts go out to victims and survivors and their families, we are so grateful that a door has been opened in this country, one which we will not allow to be closed again. From now on, victims and survivors can expect to be believed when they tell their stories. Perpetrators can be expected to be treated as the violators of law and dignity that they are. And our law enforcement and judicial committees can expect to be held accountable if they wink and nod at crimes that leave emotional bondage and psychological wounds behind. So how does this happen? For starters, we must recognize the problem exists. #MeToo. Done. Next, we must be responsible for the change we want and need to see. We can start by addressing the continued gaps and allow for victims and survivors to fall through cracks and left to pick up the pieces alone. We must recognize that there are no one-size-fits-all protocols, and victims and survivors are individuals with circumstances that are solely unique to them. We must be culturally, ethnically, and linguistically responsive and responsible for ensuring that they receive the best possible treatment from everyone who engages them, from trauma to transition. They must have a voice in this process. They must be heard and not just spoken to. They need to know what has happened to them. Number one, is not their fault. And number two, does not define who they are or who they can become. It is up to all of us to participate in changing cultural norms that leave victims and survivors re-victimized. We must help our children understand what it means to be a victim, but also what it means to be a perpetrator. We must equip our courts with laws that clearly detail what constitutes criminal sexual activity and clearly outlines the consequences of breaking such laws. Look, we did not get here overnight. It's been a long, hard road. While there were many that were responsible for the things that happened in the darkness, we're here today, and we are responsible for what happens in the light.
Yes.
There are more than hundreds, more than thousands, there are millions of victims, yet even one was too many. One person can be a victim and a survivor, but one person started a movement. So this is our invitation today. And I'd like to ask you a question. And I want you to think about this. Will you join me? Will you join the coalition in this fight? Will you help us to end sexual violence? Don't you want an Alabama free of sexual violence? Me too.